Netflix, Disney, Amazon, and Paramount are all key contenders in the streaming wars. The proliferation of services means that each is fighting to develop franchises that will keep us invested in their ecosystems by regularly releasing branded content. It's not far wrong to suggest that things like Star Wars, The Witcher, or The Lord of the Rings aren't just stories anymore, they're weapons in the arsenal of corporations. Depending on how you look at it, this situation might be fascinating, terrifying, exciting, or just exhausting. One way or another, it's our topic for this episode. Welcome to Pop Politics. I'm Damien Lewarden,
I'm Amy Campbell.
I'm Mitchell Ackhurst.
and together we are Third Take. So, the topic this evening is what we're calling the era of content, which is basically the idea that streaming services, they exist for the sole purpose of pushing out content. And I think, well, for me at least, it's really sparked up this week following Paramount Plus's big bleh a few days ago, where they announced everything that I don't think anyone asked for, like the animated cinematic universe of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villains movies. They've got 4 or 5 separate Star Trek series going. They announced a third Sonic movie before the second one's out, as well as a spin-off series. And that's on top of Netflix, of course, doing all sorts of weird things with the Bright anime movie and the Witcher spin-offs and the letter from this morning from the Duffer Brothers about the possibility of Stranger Things spin-offs by the sounds of it.
CBS as well announced that they were looking to amp up their services after having been around for so long. They decided, no, we actually want to dedicate some money and time into this. So they're trying to push into the game as well.
I wasn't aware of that. And yeah, so there's just all this content that's being produced, and it like obviously there is some sort of audience there for it, but like when I hear it, like I'm not the audience for it. Like I'm not the audience for 10 Star Wars shows in 2 years and 10 Marvel shows in 2 years. Like that just sounds exhausting to me. And yeah, like I'm gonna get to other stuff later, but for now, go.
Okay, one thing I do want to say, because when you said this was the topic we were thinking of, I started thinking about it and I'm like, gee, we just love to rehash and spin off everything, don't we? And then I really thought about it and I went, one of my favorite shows ever is Frasier. And that was a spin off. And it really took me a moment to think about that and go, there is some real value in doing that, in taking these shows and saying, what do these characters look like in a different setting, or what do these worlds mean? But only when it's meaningful. Like that was a really conscious choice that they made with that character and their relatives and that world. But it does feel like even I'm getting a little bit sick of just how often we need to keep seeing the same things. I'm like, but we'll have nothing to spin off from soon. Like if we just keep spinning off everything, we're going to have nothing new to spin off from. And it's just a really strange place to be.
That actually leads me straight headlong into something that I've seen you mention on Twitter a couple of times, Mitchell. How you say that we're sort of in this nostalgia wave now, but we're not producing the kind of content, like original content that will produce a nostalgia wave in 20 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, my stance has always been like people will sequelize and franchise and spin off until the cows come home because that's how it works. But it's just very odd for a current content universe for all of the different services and entertainment companies that they've dived headfirst into the nostalgia cycle of bringing back, X franchise from 20 years ago or Y movie from 30 years ago now gets a sequel, that sort of thing. And as you say, I've just been very critical of them not creating enough substantial that is new, because obviously there's always a new show here or there. Often I find those shows are getting the short shrift because obviously something that has no built-in fan base is going to struggle compared to the next Star Trek. But it's still, even with those shows, it's still a much smaller percentage of what we used to get. And you mentioned with Paramount Plus all the different shows they're planning, more Star Trek. They're doing more Yellowstone. I think they're doing at least another spin-off of the spin-off of Yellowstone, maybe a fourth show as well. And TMNT, same is
That
happening.
one makes me laugh.
Right.
Sorry, keep going.
Well, it's funny because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was in itself kind of an unlicensed spin-off of Daredevil. Like, there's a reason why the bad guys in TMNT are called the Foot. And it's because the bad guys in Daredevil were the hand. The creation of even an unlicensed parody of something, like a Deadpool, has gone way down recently because instead they're appealing to nostalgia.
I love parody.
And without having enough of those, you're not going to have the same wealth of nostalgia 20 years from now. If you're not creating the next Star Trek, the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the next Deadpool today, then 20 years from now, you won't have the 20-year-old franchises that started today in order to bring back with a nostalgia play. So,
this is a random thought, just touching on that point. Because one thing you mentioned there is, and this is very true of games, in that, taking franchises people are familiar with makes it a very safe bet for investors and people, because you can guarantee what percentage of an audience is going to come back for that thing. And that's kind of cool in and of itself. But my random thought that kind of just occurs to me here is it maybe we are seeing enough of that content, but just because there's so damn much of it, we just don't know what that thing's going to be for that group of people yet. Like, who knows? Maybe there is something right now that everyone's watching that we just might be completely unaware of because it's something slightly outside of our own circles. Maybe that is the thing in 20 years, but we just have no idea about it because we're not looking at it with hindsight yet. I don't know. Like, I genuinely don't know. Because now that I'm thinking about it, everything I love are sequels or spin-offs, and I'm really starting to question myself.
oh, that's okay. Like, honestly, we love to intellectualize this stuff, but in the end of it all, you like what you like. And I really like Star Trek Lower Decks, for example, and that's Star Trek show number 7 or number 8, maybe.
What about you, Damien? What are your thoughts on this?
I was actually thinking about this earlier and kind of reached the same sort of point that you did, Amy, in that, like, obviously new content is still being produced at scale. Like, the amount of, like, Netflix originals that are actually originals and aren't adaptations or spin-offs or whatever is still pretty damn impressive. But I think, like, the big problem that I have with the whole situation is the amount of content that's being produced. It kind of squashes out that stuff. So, like you said, like, we're not watching it, but someone is. But I think, like, because there's so much attention being poured into, the Book of Boba Fett or
Absolutely.
Hawkeye or whatever, there's so much noise around that like everything else, it doesn't manage to reach the mainstream. Like something like Tribes of Europa, it's like, yes, okay, there is a barrier to the English speaking world because it's a German show, but it's really good. But no one that I know has ever spoken of it.
Yeah.
When was the last time a movie that wasn't a sequel or an adaptation or a remake or a spin-off since Avatar in 2009.
Bro, I
that came,
can't think on
that came its
demand like
own
that. You have to give me this question in advance. I can't think on demand like that.
Well, it is a little rhetorical because the point is that, like, if you go to the box office listings on the numbers, or don't even bother with the IMDb stuff anymore. They've kind of balked it. But if you go to the numbers or Wikipedia and you look at the top 10 most successful films
Yeah.
of the year for the past 3 decades, in the 1990s, in fact, I may have even done this on the Escapist Slack, or this, it's either on the Escapist Slack or on Flixist, which neither of you guys are on, but I actually listed and compared 1993 to 2013, and in 1993 it's something like you've got your Jurassic Park, you've got a legal thriller, you've got a romance, and you do have a sequel at one point, and you do have another adaptation, but it's pretty a big variety. You know, it's not just everything's a book adaptation, and it's not just everything is an action movie. If you look at the most successful movies of that year in the 1990s, it's quite a spread. And then you move forward 20, and at this stage nearly 30 years, and you look at the top 10 most successful movies. Instead, it's superhero, 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 non-superhero comic book, superhero, superhero, sequel, remake.
It's hard as well, though, because box office statistics are so different now. And even though inflation and things come into play, I mean, it's a really interesting reflection on what we like to watch and how we consume things. But at the same time, it is so different now. And I guess that's pretty much the whole point, really. But, you know, it's also in the era of content, we have people suing companies that they made the movie for, saying, well, you botched our release. You didn't do great with our box office sales because you wanted people on your subscription service. And it's an interesting thing to keep in mind because it sucks for a lot of people, and I don't really know who wins in that.
Actually, I just looked it up, and there's even a stark difference now between 2013 and, say, 2019. Because you know what happened is, we all want to see something that aligns with our interests. It's was it something like the 90% similar, 10% different rule, where, as you say, like whenever we're trying to find something we want to see, it's usually 90% of what we were expecting and 10% of something new. And that just becomes harder and harder when the movies that are being represented to people, whether you're talking the companies that are being sued and how well they're actually advertising the movie, or just at the end, like, does the movie itself present well enough for word of mouth, which, you know, is another thing. Like, we can't blame the companies for everything. We can blame them for a lot, but word of mouth also counts. Like, sometimes the movie just, it could be a very depressing movie and is therefore not very recommendable to other people or something. If you look at 2013 compared to more recently, they're all sequels, but they're sequels to a Disney movie, Fast and Furious, Pixar movie, a superhero movie, and also Hunger Games and a kids movie, Despicable Me. So we
You
went
said
from
Despicable Me like it was a dirty word.
did I?
It's great. It's a great movie. How dare you? I like my Minion
No
memes fresh, thank
sure.
you.
Yeah, you go from Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, The Firm, Sleepless in Seattle, Mrs.
Yeah.
Doubtfire, a whole lot of very different movies. To
There's something in common with those, though. Let's be honest. And it
Oh.
was 90s was the era of the superstar. And it was, look at these famous, fabulous people. We don't have superstars now. We have super brands. We have super franchises that are going to bring someone in more than a Jennifer Aniston or something will. Sure, you can star-stud that cast all you want, but people aren't coming for that star-studded cast because guess what? They can just replace them at any point in time and say, oh, it's multiverse, whatever. They can do whatever they want with that.
I think you've nailed on the head. You've hit the nail on the head for why Paramount is creating spin-offs to Yellowstone and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because they're brands. They're not stars. If we were having Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and Apple Plus and all the other pluses in the 90s, then maybe we wouldn't have
Apple TV is an
brands. We
interesting
would have.
example, though.
It
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Because Apple TV's quality is bizarrely high and quite unique in what it produces. And I find that so fascinating. Like, it's a really strange outlier there. And even talking in the opposition of that as well is I had never watched Breaking Bad. And I had decided for whatever reason, I really like the looks of that lawyer character. I want to watch Better Call Saul. So I sat through Breaking Bad, enjoyed it, and then watched Better Call Saul. I love it so much. And with the announcement of their final season release date recently, they also announced that they were making, I think, 2 spin-offs with it, or not quite spin-offs in the way, but when everyone loves Kim Wexler's character, like everyone loves that character. Let's do something else with this actress. So I'm actually not 100% sure if whatever the thing that's about a movie producer going to, I think it's called Cooper's Bar is the name of this spin-off. And it's about her being a movie producer and frequenting a bar. And they've taken that because people liked the actress, which is more akin to what we used to see. And I think it wasn't dissimilar in them taking Better Call Saul and making that its own thing. And I think that's really interesting, and then highlighting how exceptional the writing and the storytelling in that is. And the characters they've built around that is because they took it from that rather than, oh yeah, people liked Breaking Bad, so let's just do it again. They went, what does this character look like in another setting? Same to Frasier. I clearly have a type. But it's really interesting to see that stark difference, because once you see it, it's kind of hard to not see it.
Damien, should we take a short break and maybe come back with a trend in the era of content that we enjoy and a trend in the era of content that we don't?
Yep. So when you say break, do you mean like the whole "what are we vibing" thing, or?
Well, I just thought because you might not want to do it right off the dome.
Spin it as a what are we vibing? I can do that. I can
Alright. So I think it's my turn.
do it.
What have I been vibing? I think I'm gonna mention "In My Blood It Runs" as mine, because it's a documentary, and I don't normally get along with documentaries, like at all. I just find them so, like, obviously there's a lot of value to a documentary, but I don't. Yeah, something about them just turns me off. The idea of someone just sitting there droning on, which is odd because like I like droning on when it comes to like reading and stuff. But yeah, when it's like visual, I don't engage with it as well. But yeah, so this documentary, it came out I think at the start of last year, and it just follows this 10 or 11-year-old Indigenous kid in Alice Springs, and just the struggles that the family's gone through. And yeah, it's just a wonderful, wonderful movie that I think is really valuable for anyone in Australia, at the very least, to watch if they're interested in those sorts of issues.
No, that's cool. It's always interesting to hear those types of things. It's funny that you don't like documentaries. I think I was chatting with my partner about this as well, because now that you've said that and I think about it, and I go, I quite like documentaries. And I'm like, is that just because I'm like deeply egotistical and quite narcissistic? I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. But then why would I be interested in other people? That's just really something to think about, you know?
like for me, I think it's like that connection that documentaries are. They're always like these really didactic. Oh, we're going to teach you something sorts of things,
Yeah,
and
okay, that's fair.
like yeah, I like that when it's a book. Like when it's a textbook, I can get along with that. But when it's
Yeah.
a documentary, I'm like, just stop talking, just
Now,
show
see,
me.
if I may spin off from that, and this is not dissimilar to the era of content, I love mockumentaries. It is my
Mm.
favorite genre of anything. I just bleep and love it. I and the one example I think of, and this actually came up on Twitter the other day, and I was like, yes, this is a correct take. I rarely think that on Twitter. And I was like, no, this person is right. And they were like, American Vandal was brilliant. It was robbed. It should have had a season 3. It's one of the best things you'll ever watch. And I was like, yes, I can't agree more. It is. If you haven't watched American Vandal, watch it because it's so good. And I love it so much. It is childish in its humor, but makes such huge points about the current general society for our young people. And I'm like, yes, keep going. Just give me more of that good shit. And I'm just really sad that there wasn't more of it because it was so good. And I think about it all the time. And I just wish there was more of it. And it's such a hard thing to do right and pull off. And I feel like that's why we don't see as much of it because it is just so hard to do
Mm.
and do well. God, I love it. So if anyone has any mockumentary suggestions, send them my way. Because my God, I love them so much.
That's a good question now, because I also really like mockumentaries, but I only ever watch them when they sort of cross my path. Like I don't seek them out.
Because they're so few and far between, though.
Mm.
I don't know. All of this is so far out of my wheelhouse.
Are they not your thing?
I don't think I've ever watched a mockumentary.
Watch American Vandal. Seriously, no, Damien, seriously. I know that it's like, like the whole first season is just dick jokes and the whole second season is just poo jokes. But you do not understand how poignant and brilliant the commentary it makes is. Like, it is genuinely phenomenal. And you would quite like what it's presenting to you and the way it presents it to you, because you just don't think until you get to about halfway through, you start going, oh my God, what this highlights about our culture and the way we treat people. Wow, we're not doing good, are we? And it's just brilliant. It's so good.
Where
Like
can we find it?
it's on Netflix. It was a Netflix
Okay.
original.
Okay, cool.
It got 2 seasons and it was genuinely brilliant. It seems really silly, but that's the point. Like, it is meant to be silly. It is meant to be over the top. And then it just kind of hits you once you finish it. You go, oh my God, the way everyone in that situation reacted and how they went about what, like, the premise is about. It really does make you think. It's like, oh, we should be doing better. I love it. And it was such a shame there's not more of it. I just really wanted to get a shout out for it in there. I just couldn't stop thinking about it for some reason. And I'm like, I just need to talk about how great it is. So thank you for indulging that. Thank you.
You are most welcome. All right, Mitch, you suggested that switch over of topics. So, do you want to start? What is your? Do you want? Okay, let's start negative. What don't you like about the era of content?
All right, so it kind of ties a little bit into what you said about the big franchises kind of never stopping putting out shows, and that is for me, I'd say the trend that is impacting me, or I don't know, is just making me exhausted, is the false promise of short seasons. Because
Yes.
I really like the idea of having short seasons, but for reasons behind the camera and in front, sort of at the streaming TV level, it's kind of screwing us up, because a show that has 10 episodes in its season sounds pretty good. But if you then find out actually they had to make 30 episodes and they split it into 3 seasons, and they didn't actually get a pay raise with each season because they counted it as one block, then that's way less cool for the people making that show, because they essentially got season 2 and 3 at no additional cost to the streamer. They essentially asked for a season, but then got 3 seasons out of it. And then on the receiving end, just as a consumer, I think of myself as a consumer when it comes to these streaming TV shows, even though when I'm selling something to someone, they're a customer. Is that with something like Marvel or Star Wars, it doesn't even result in less content vomit, because Star Wars has, as you mentioned, the Book of Boba Fett, which is a 7-episode show. But the same year, we also got The Bad Batch, which is 16 episodes. And we're about to get 2 more shows before the end of this year with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Andor, both of which are short season shows. But when you add it all together, you're just getting the same 20 or more episodes of TV for a year. And it can't be costing any less. Like, they're probably spending 10 times as much as you would spend on a regular television series, and they're just splitting it up, making it look like there's a short season when really it's the same or even more than you're used to. Just you're tricked into thinking that it's a short season. So I'm looking here at the Marvel TV shows that they did for Disney Plus, where they had something like 20 or 30 episodes last year. It just so happened that they called them different shows. So there's like 5 different shows, and they each have something like 6 or 8 episodes in them. But that's still most of the year. There's going to be an episode of that show on TV, and that's maybe a little too much for me.
If you think that's bad, you clearly don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race, so I won't even go into
Oh my
how
God.
much
I'm one of the people
that is.
I'm one of the people who doesn't think there should be 5 Star Trek shows on TV in the same year. And I really love Star Trek, so that should suggest what I think about the number of episodes.
I almost have I agree with you, but I disagree with you. And it's kind of hard to explain why. I love a long season. I love television, and I think that's why I like long video games so much, is I want to spend as much time as humanly possible in a world. And so I disagree that I get what you're saying with, like, Marvel TV shows, there were like 30 episodes of them throughout the year. Having watched all bar the Winter Soldier and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that's the only one I haven't seen. They were all catering to different audiences. And many of them fell into the pitfall of either doing nothing but trying to do everything. Whereas if they had been this big continuous beast, I think it would be quite different. But I'm someone that loves the traditional, give me 22 or 24 episodes of my show and off I go for a season. And I find these short seasons often don't quite do them justice. And I'm wondering historically, because I don't know, my realm is not TV here. I'm very curious as to, in terms of when a network said, yep, we're picking up that pilot, we're taking that TV show. Historically, why was that the length of time? Because I have no idea. Because surely it was based on it being a particular rating season was done through American winter, because it's when Americans were most likely to be at home and not in sport. or something. And so that period takes 22 weeks, which is how this happens. I have no idea. I'm making that up.
To
Whereas
put it in a
now,
nutshell, the original
yeah,
idea was like you would have seasons of shows with like 26 episodes, and
so it was
if
half a year.
it's half a year, that's why
Yeah.
they would call it a season, I guess. It's not really one season, but it's a season of television for them, and the idea
Okay.
they would book different shows for each half of the year. And
Mm.
when they started
Okay.
producing those, that's when you get like the 13 episode season, because even after they'd said they weren't doing 26 episodes
Breaks.
a year. Sorry?
Or when they started doing mid-season breaks and
Right,
things,
yeah.
but
So
they're like,
even if they weren't going up to 26, even if they were only going to 22 or 24, they would produce 13 because that was like
yeah,
half of the the original length that they would usually go.
Mm.
And if they did a mid-season break, then it would still end up going half a year because you'd have a couple weeks
yeah.
where they didn't show the episode.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing about like you do
Okay.
a pilot, then you get 13, and then you do the back 9, and all those sort of industry terms, which I don't know, like because I've used them. I only know because I've looked them up. um,
No, but that makes a whole lot of sense. And like,
yeah,
I've definitely
it makes
learned
sense as a
something from
yearly
that.
production of a show. Like if your job is to produce this show every year, then you would, as a producer, you would arrange to have like what's the maximum, what's the minimum we can do every
Yeah.
12 months.
Mm. Can I just break in for a second? Because that was how it was done for a really long time. But then I think it was around 2000 I want to say 2008, 2009 was when the writers' strike happened. And that
There were
brought on a
lots of shows
real
that had to
shift.
show. Yep.
Yes, and ever since then, the shows have been much shorter than they were before, in general, not
Well,
obviously
yeah.
across the
So
board, but
it's a great reason for them to be shorter,
mm,
and also the more TV that ends up being in this high fantastical comic book inspired style, the fewer episodes they have to actually render, the
mhm,
easier it is on the CG animators, like all the special effects people. Like it's much less stressful. It's still very stressful, obviously, because they have stressful work conditions, but it's much easier to do 6 episodes of something with lots of special effects like Loki than it
mm,
is to try and do a whole 20.
mm. You just reminded me of that Simpsons episode where they're like, "Oh no, we very rarely do cartoons live. It puts a terrible strain on the animators' wrists."
My lord, imagine that. But okay, no, that's really interesting because I was going to say, like, maybe the 6 episodes come from this or that, and I'm really glad I have an answer for that. So no, thank you for sharing that knowledge with me. That's really cool to know, and something I'll probably look into a bit more because yeah, it's
You'll
interesting.
find Netflix also has driven a lot of the changes there
Mm,
because they have their own requirements that don't have to be beholden to television schedules at all.
yeah.
And the way Netflix decided to do it early on has since reverberated out through the other streaming services.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the big reasons that Netflix sort of goes with or tries to focus on those 10 episodes and shorter seasons was because when they first signed Orange is the New Black, it was for 13 episodes, and they found that there was a lot of drop off. So they kind of, yeah, went, okay, well, we're going to make shorter shows and try to stop people from dropping off at that midway point.
That's interesting. And I guess that kind of makes sense. But our attention spans were long enough for us to sit through 20 episodes before. Not that I'm saying, again, if the conditions and that are something that comes into play, and it's unbelievably important that it does. But it's just so funny when we're in an era where you can say, this is the exact way we want to tell this story. This is the exact number of episodes we want. This is the exact arc of this story. I want it to be 17 episodes for my one season. It's just fascinating that we're not doing that, that we are so beholden to these
Yeah.
algorithms instead of going, no, this is exactly how this will be perfect for you.
So
And them going,
it may have been one of the guests, not guests, but one of the hosts who's not currently on the site on the podcast. I can't remember who it was, but we were talking about Netflix contracts and how for a long time they actually didn't say how many episodes they wanted, but the episodes had to be over a certain length of time, which is just another restriction. So
Ah,
that's why you end up with so many shows on Netflix that have 60-minute or more long episodes, because I guess Netflix wants to
no.
offer this impression of bigness. And so if the episodes are bigger than just your 45-minute TV episode, then the I guess the mainstream sort of feels like they're getting more value from it. So for a while there, they were saying, we don't mind if you do like a 5-episode show or a 15-episode show, but each
It
episode
has to
has
be a
to
certain
be
length.
like 55 minutes or more. Like it has to be a big chunky episode.
I don't know why I feel like you'll know what I'm talking about, Damien, but
Hmm.
I've not seen this, but it's just making me wonder who made it. And I adore Nick Hornby's writing. I've read every book bar, maybe the new one, because I didn't know there was a new one. And I was like, ooh. Um, so he did About a Boy, High Fidelity, Funny Girl,
Hmm.
Juliet Naked. I just really like the way he writes. And he did the screenwriting for a TV show that was, I want to say the actor's Chris O'Dowd, and it's the woman that was in Gone Girl, that actress, Rosamund Pike. Is that who it is? And I believe it was just like 7, 8, or 9, like a very short number of episodes, but they were like 10-minute episodes of TV.
Mm.
And it's called State of Affairs. I think that's what it's called.
Union?
State of the Union. And it's this couple that are going through like couples therapy to divorce. But they don't want to look bad when they go to the therapist, so they meet at a coffee shop beforehand to like get their story straight. And it's just such an absurd, silly little concept, and I haven't actually watched it yet. And I'd really like to, but we're in a world where someone's letting someone make something like that, which is so off the beat of what anyone else is doing. But it's so few and far between that we don't get to see something like that as a success and go, hey, this is kind of a cool format. Maybe we should experiment or try something different. And I do think that's a real shame. Like, to answer the question that started this, like, what's a trend that we don't like and a trend that we do like? I definitely feel like there seems to be a lot of restriction, and this ideal, like, perfect formula for a TV show of one action sequence, 6 episodes, a cameo from a character or an actor people will know and love, and then bing bam boom, we've got the magic formula.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a shame, because there is so much magic that comes from the absurd and our silly musings at a coffee shop, that it is a shame we don't see more of that and hear those more interesting stories, because if we just keep rehashing and revisiting stuff and making things out of things that were, the reality is we're going to keep seeing the same shit we've seen for 50 plus years, when there are some people from different backgrounds that have much more exciting, cool stories to share, and I want to hear those. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep hearing the same thing. And I've done that. I don't want to hear that anymore. And that, to me, I think is something I'd like to see. And I think we're starting to see it more. And it is something that excites me, is because there is just money to make content, is hopefully within that there will be gems of pure gold. And that excites me. That's something I do like, even though it's part of the negative. I like it at the same time.
Yeah. Because I actually wanted to say something similar, but before I do, I just want to say one other thing that I like is how we're seeing a few more anthology series coming out as well.
Mm.
Because my partner and I right now we're watching Oat Studio, which is those shorts that Neil Blomkamp did. They're a few years old now.
Ah.
Um, but yeah, and that's really interesting, like sci-fi shorts of just like experimental filmmaking, and I really enjoy that. And then there's another one. I can't remember what service is on it. I know I haven't seen it. It might be Hulu, but it's the story of a bunch of stories of just what happens in this one hotel room. And each
Oh, yeah,
episode,
I love shit like that. I don't know what you're
each
talking about, but I'm the same. I love that stuff.
yeah, each episode has, I think, like a different director, different writing team, and it just like tells a different story of people coming into the hotel room and what they get up to.
Huh.
And it sounds really brilliant, but yeah, I can't even remember what it is. So my fault. Um, yeah. So Mitch, did you want to say what you do like?
Well, it's very me, but I just really like the money that's gone into animated shows in the
Hmm.
streaming wars
Fair.
because
Yep.
because it's kind of ridiculous that it took a brand new land grab for companies that own these entertainment services to realize people really like cartoons and animated shows. My list was just sort of looking down the last few years of Netflix, and what has been on Netflix is just like unbelievable.
Mm.
We talk about there being a glut to the extent that it can crowd out the good stuff. But if you like a certain kind of animation, kids
Yes,
and adult, like there is so much on Netflix
Hmm.
that
absolutely.
it's kind of hard not to justify. Like BoJack Horseman, one of my favorite shows of all time. Voltron, which is not Avatar: The Last Airbender, but is still very good. Troll Hunters: Tales of Arcadia is excellent. She-Ra and the Princesses of Power is apparently great. That's on my list, but it's like 5 or 6 seasons of, She-Ra action. It's apparently a really good show. Uh, a really good show that I know is good because I watched it the instant it came out is Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about before.
Yes.
And similarly, there's a new show that I'm watching called Maya and the Three from Jorge Gutierrez, who did El Tigre and a movie called The Book of Life.
I
Very
saw that one
Yes.
come up, and I was like,
idiosyncratic.
do I want to watch it?
It's excellent.
Okay.
I heard that one pop up as well and heard that it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's. I mean, he described it sort of offhand as like I'm doing a Mesoamerican Lord of the Rings kind of a story, but with humor, and that's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah, I've heard
big
very good things.
adventure that's also very very funny.
I'll be that person that's like, Arcane is phenomenal. I know
Yeah.
that's so mainstream, but bloody hell, if that
Oh
isn't
no! You,
brilliant.
you're
It
telling
is
me the show
brilliant.
that's based on a game has no right to be any good, is produced in
Brilliant.
features magitech and airships and weird little furry
Brilliant.
professors.
Disgustingly good.
Yeah,
It's
way too.
annoying. It's very good. But it's interesting you bring up animation because, yeah, I want to add to that. Absolutely. The animation we are getting to see from Netflix at the moment is phenomenal. Something like Mitchell vs. the Machines,
Mm,
amazing movie,
I didn't even think of
beautiful
them.
story.
Yeah, they're really great.
I mean, I really like Disenchanted and all sorts of things. And so clearly there is a lot of I think we're all just thinking, give us the moody dramas, give us this or give us that. It doesn't have to be a big screen drama moment. It can just be give me something I can just devour at home and sob myself to sleep at night. But animation is killing it, particularly on Netflix.
Mm.
And it's really cool to see because it is something for so long. Like after we watched Arcane, we were speaking to someone that we know that's not necessarily into games or anything, and trying to convince them and say, no, you don't understand. This is something that you'll enjoy. Stop putting whatever perception you have on it. it's so hard to convey to people just how good these stories and what animation can do. And it reminds me of a conversation that we had, I had on the Marvelous Escape podcast when that was running, about what if, and saying, if you're going to do it as animation, this was something Darren really spoke about, and it really stuck with me, is if you're going to do it as animation, do it in a way that you could never do it in person. Do anything and make it magic, because you have that freedom, whereas you don't in live action. And maybe that's not the magic formula that's quite there in Marvel's animation, but I think in terms of what they're doing over at Netflix, I do think it's cool to see. It puts a lot of awesome job opportunities up for very talented people as well. And it helps inspire so many. Like, seeing stuff like that can change someone's whole career path and change their whole life. And in a way that other things can't quite do, just because they're more invisible in a sense. Whereas animation, it's so in your face. And yeah, I just think that's amazing. And now that I've seen what we've gotten, I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, apparently.
Apparently, we get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Look, if it's as good as Star Trek Lower Decks, I mean, give me it.
Just believe and it'll happen.
I mean, I know one of the things that I'm quite excited for is Disney Plus original, and I'm probably going to butcher the name because it's African, but Iwaju. I don't know much about it, but I just know that the production team behind it, they came out and they said, we want to beat Disney at their game. And then Disney got in touch with them and went, well, yeah, we want you on our service. And I think the idea of that is so cool, and it ties into what I really like about the era of content and streaming services, is that they allow so much content. Yes, it's a negative when you have these content wars where everyone's just trying to push their brands to be bigger and bigger and better and better and just more in your face than everyone else. But on the other side of that is like, because they need to just push content everywhere, so they will just approve anything that comes their way, and I love that. I love that we're seeing so many foreign things that are just so accessible, because like 10 years ago, try finding anything that was actually made in France in cinemas. Unless you have like a local art house cinema, and there's not many of those around. Like, you're just not going to do it. And now it's like right there on Netflix in your home, day one. I love that.
Yeah, completely agree.
I think it's great. It is also interesting every time it happens with a breakout hit, like Lupin or the Squid Game, with
or even like Roma.
Yeah, I think Netflix in particular, because they have less history and therefore don't seem dominated by an American history the same way that a Disney Plus is. But like, for still a majority American styled company, it's just funny that they end up telling on themselves by producing excellent content from other countries. Like this Disney Plus example, where it's going to be this big African sci-fi show, and they want to beat Disney at their own game. Like, it'll probably end up being pretty good. And the thing about that is, it'll probably be better than half the stuff Disney's doing. And that happens quite often because, Disney will have a whole section on Disney Plus that is stuff that they were handed over when they bought Fox. And there are TV shows still debuting on there. I think it's not quite the same in the States, actually. It's because they have Hulu, which is its own thing. But we get that all through Disney Plus here in Australia. So it's just funny to see, like, oh, there's a real TV show here next to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which, as we sort of discussed, doesn't really feel as much like actual TV. I don't hate those movies. I think the only one I've really disliked is probably that sort of that middle era, like Doctor Strange. I wasn't a huge fan of. Avengers 2 I was a little bit disappointed by, but most of the time I don't hate them at all. I just remember feeling
My fun fact is I have tried to watch the first Avengers movie like 4 times at the same friend's house, and I fall asleep at the exact same point every time. I'm not someone that falls asleep during the day, but I fall asleep during this movie when I'm with her. And then I wake up at the same point every time, right towards the end, like 10, 15 minutes before the end. It's like Nick Fury's on the screen, and I'm like, oh, should I fall asleep? And she's like, oh, sorry, I did the same. And then we both just look at each other and we're like, well, shit. And it happens every time. We've tried like at least 3 times. And I just find it so funny that's my life with that movie.
It's a lot more explicable between me and my dad because he's a sci-fi nut.
Right.
And so we enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
The game is so good.
Which are excellent.
I loved the movies. The game is very good.
The game is also very good. It's curious, quite difficult to grasp to us just how much better, or rather, how much more we enjoy those compared to every other Marvel movie.
When it comes to like the Marvel universe, I kind of nothing the whole thing, and my favorite of the whole lot is Iron Man 3, which I know is an extremely unpopular opinion.
Oh, that's my favorite, but for the Guardians movies, so you're not alone.
I don't even know what mine is. I don't know.
Oh, I had listed them up on Letterboxd a while ago. I was like, oh, these are the Marvel and DC movies that I think are actually good. And out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was Iron Man 3 and the 2 Guardians movies.
Nah, I'm that person that's like, Shazam is the best. I'm that person.
I think Shazam is at least better than Guardians 2. Maybe even better than Guardians 1.
I like Shazam a lot.
It's a bit dark in places.
I liked it for that.
Yeah, it's... Wow. I mean, hopefully... I'll tell you what, look, this is actually an interesting point. I'm not just saying this because I like the sound of my own voice. Shazam was very important to me because I didn't grow up reading superhero comics. I don't really care about superhero comics, as I've probably made clear on here before. And I always, as a kid, watching superhero movies, thought they were kind of anti-socialist in some ways. Like in boring ways, I thought like, oh, there's this power that can make people strong or help save the world or whatever. It's always sad to me that like no one else had this power. It's just this one person, and if anyone else in the universe of this movie also has that power, then they'll end up being the villain. And because that was just the way my brain processed the way that superhero.
Self-focused. I think that's what I liked about Shazam as well, though.
Exactly.
Is you walk out and it's like, no, there's power in numbers. There's power in being together, and I think
that's why it was so really special. The fact that they actually take it to its logical conclusion. They're like, oh, it's not just for one person. You can do this thing, and suddenly there's a whole group of superheroes.
Say my name, Billy! We yell that out all the time to each other, my partner and I, because really? I just love that all the time. It'd be like, say my name, Billy! And then it's like, no, Shazam! And we yell that out all the time because that scene is embedded in my head. I loved it. It was so good.
Yeah, it's that is the superhero version of the ending of Cabin in the Woods for me, where they actually go there. Like in the way that Cabin in the Woods sets up that there's all these sorts of monsters, and then that final sequence with everything showing up. The fact that they get to the end of Shazam and they're like, no, we're really going there. We're going to have a whole bunch of these characters. It's just fantastic.
I think that about sums it up. I think our conversation, if I may wrap this,
of course.
I think we ended up agreeing, correct me if I'm wrong, that the thing we hate about the era of content is also the thing we like about it. because it opens up opportunities for lots of people. And there's nothing wrong with it being one in the same. It is definitely a double-sided coin. Like,
Mm,
I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. Content's cool, and
it
people are
is.
doing cool things with it. And I feel more optimistic about it after having this conversation than I did walking into it. And I think that's kind of cool that it's left me on the positive side of it. And I didn't necessarily think I'd err that way. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're saying the content wars are a triple-edged sword.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
there's the good stuff, the bad stuff, and what we actually get.
That beautiful middle ground.
Yeah. I think that beautifully sums it up too. All right. We haven't done this in a while. But is there anything either of you want to plug before we sign out?
Oh, I'm not that interesting. I haven't been lately anyway. I've been trying to readjust myself to real life responsibilities. But if there is one thing I may plug, because I love it with all my heart, and I'm very, very excited because the season 2 for it is coming soon, is I am part of a Dungeons and Dragons series called Adventure is Nigh, starring a fabulous cast. We have the most exceptional dungeon master in the world. And you can find that over on The Escapist on YouTube. Season 2 will be a YouTube exclusive. Ooh, hot fresh info. But it's a lot of fun. I play a really strong cat called Dabarella who just believes that friendship is magic, and I just adore her so much. And I'm just excited for more of that. So be sure to check that out if you haven't.
I don't have anything to plug right now. You can follow me for more ramblings like the ones we do here on Twitter at Polygon Native, no space or anything. But stay tuned because there's a couple of things I'm involved in that will become much more prominent later in the year.
Exciting. Yeah, not much from me lately. Although the latest issue of Aurelius magazine, Aurealis magazine, if I
Words are
can
hard. It's
pronounce it
okay.
properly. It is, especially with a headache. Um, issue number 147 came out a few weeks ago, and I have, I believe, 5 reviews published in it. So, yeah, that's my plug.
Hype.
Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, something we've never done before is if you like the conversation we've had, want to catch more of it, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you're already on. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Bye.